The call came while I was elbow deep in soapy water, trying to scrub dried spaghetti sauce off Ava's favorite princess plate. My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail. I already knew what she wanted. My name is Lila, and I've spent most of my life being the responsible one, the reliable daughter who's supposed to fix everything. Sometimes I wonder if that's all I am to them, a human ATM with a guilty conscience. Lila, sweetheart. My mother's voice carried that familiar urgent tone. I hate to ask, but Tessa's new treatment plan. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the sink. Behind me, I could hear Ava giggling with Rosa, our nanny, as they played with her stuffed animals. The sound of my daughter's laughter used to make everything better, but lately, it just reminded me of how much I needed to protect her from becoming part of this cycle. How much? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. 15,000, my mother said quickly, as if saying it faster would make it hurt less. The insurance won't cover it, and you know your father's business hasn't been doing well. I thought about the college fund I'd started for Ava, and how every extra dollar I made went straight into it. Since Mark died 2 years ago, I'd been careful with our money, making sure we'd be okay. But 15,000? That wasn't careful money. That was survival money. Mom, I can't. Not this time. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the guilt trip, right on schedule. Your sister needs this, Lila. She's been so sick, and you know how fragile she is. I thought after what happened with Mark, you'd understand how precious life is. My hand tightened around the phone, using Mark's death to manipulate me. That was a new low, even for her. Don't, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Don't you dare use Mark to guilt me into this. I'm not trying to guilt you into anything, she protested, but we both knew better. Tessa's your only sister. Family helps family. I watched as Rosa helped Ava put on her tiny backpack, getting ready for their afternoon walk. My daughter looked up at me with Mark's eyes, and something inside me finally snapped. What about when I needed help? I asked quietly. When Mark died and I could barely get out of bed. When I needed someone to watch Ava, so I could go to grief counseling. Where was Family Helps Family then? That was different, my mother said dismissively. Tessa was going through a particularly bad spell. She always is, Mom. There's always a reason why Tessa needs help more than I do. I don't understand why you're being so selfish. My mother's voice turned cold. After everything we've done for you. I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Everything you've done for me? Name one thing, Mom. One thing you've done for me that didn't somehow end up being about Tessa. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. When my mother spoke again, her voice was trembling with anger. Well, if that's how you feel, maybe you should take some time to think about your priorities. Your sister could die without this treatment, Lila. I hope you can live with that on your conscience. The call ended, and I stood there, staring at my reflection in the window above the sink. I looked tired, worn down by years of being the family backup plan. But there was something else in my eyes now, a spark of defiance that reminded me of Mark. Mama, Ava tugged at my pants leg. We go park now. I picked her up, breathing in her sweet baby shampoo smell. Yes, baby. Let's go to the park. Rosa, would you mind if I joined you today? As we walked to the park, I made a decision. It was time to stop being the family ATM, the guilty daughter, the reliable fix-it-all. It was time to be something else, something stronger. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't answer it. 3 days after my mother's call, I found myself standing on my parents' doorstep, Ava's small hand in mine. I'd promised myself I wouldn't come, but guilt is a powerful motivator, something my family has always known how to exploit. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, looking exhausted but somehow still managing to wear that expression of disappointed expectation I knew so well. "Oh, you brought Ava," she said, her tone suggesting this was somehow inconvenient. "Tessa's resting in the living room. She's had such a difficult morning." Of course she was. Tessa was always having a difficult morning, especially when there were important discussions to be had about money. The living room looked like a hospital suite had exploded inside it. Pillows everywhere, medication bottles lined up on the coffee table, and my sister sprawled dramatically on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up when we entered. "Aunt Tessa." Ava ran toward her, but my mother intercepted her. "Careful, sweetie. Aunt Tessa isn't feeling well today." I watched Tessa suddenly put down her phone and press a hand to her forehead. "Oh, my head is killing me. Mom, could you get me some water? And maybe those new pills Dr. Matthews prescribed." My father sat in his usual armchair, hidden behind his newspaper. He lowered it slightly when I entered, giving me a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So," my mother said, returning with Tessa's water, "have you reconsidered about helping with the treatment?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, I wanted to talk about that. I've been looking into this new treatment you mentioned, and I can't find anything about it online. Which clinic is offering it?" The room went quiet. Too quiet. Tessa suddenly became very interested in adjusting her blanket. "Well," my mother began, "it's more of an experimental treatment. Dr. Matthews says." "Dr. Matthews?" I interrupted. "The same Dr. Matthews who prescribed those special supplements last year that turned out to be regular vitamins marked up by 500%. You always do this," Tessa's voice cracked with practiced precision. "You always try to make it seem like I'm making things up. Like I'm not really sick. That's not what I'm saying." "Yes, it is." Tessa sat up, tears already forming. "You're just jealous because Mom and Dad have to spend more time taking care of me. You've always been jealous." My father rustled his newspaper uncomfortably. "Girls, please." "Jealous?" I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Tessa, I just found out you used the money I lent you last month, money that was supposed to be for your emergency medication, to book a spa weekend with your friends. I saw the pictures on Instagram." The room froze. My mother's face went pale, while Tessa's flushed red. "You're stalking my social media now? Your account is public, Tessa. And you tagged the spa." My mother stepped between us. Tessa needed that relaxation for her health. "The stress has been—" "Stop it." I cut her off. "Just stop. Do you know what I could have done with that money? Ava needs new winter clothes. Her preschool tuition is due next month. But instead, my sister needed a mud bath and a seaweed wrap. You have no idea what it's like to be sick all the time." Tessa wailed. "And you have no idea what it's like to be a widow raising a child alone." The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. My father finally put down his newspaper. "Lila, that's enough." "No, it's not enough," I said, my voice shaking. "When Mark died, I needed my family. But Tessa had a migraine that week, remember? And the next week. And the week after that. That's not fair," my mother protested. "None of this is fair." I picked up Ava, who had been quietly playing with her stuffed rabbit in the corner. "I'm done. No more money, no more guilt trips, no more pretending this is normal." As I headed for the door, my mother called after me. "If you walk out now, don't expect us to be there when you need us." I turned back one last time. "Were you ever?" The drive home was quiet, except for Ava singing softly to her rabbit in the back seat. My phone kept buzzing with messages from my mother and Tessa, but I didn't need to read them to know what they said. The same old script, just with different words. But something had changed today. For the first time, I saw my family clearly. Not as I wished they were, but as they actually are. And sometimes that kind of clarity is worth more than any amount of money they could ask for. A week after my confrontation at my parents' house, I received an unexpected email from their bank. At first, I assumed it was spam. Why would their bank contact me? But the subject line made my stomach drop. "Past due notice, co-signed loan agreement." I hadn't co-signed any loans. My hands shook as I opened the email. There it was in black and white. My name on a $60,000 loan, supposedly signed 6 months ago. The same month Tessa had her emergency surgery that my parents had begged me to help with. I called the bank immediately, my voice trembling as I spoke with the representative. "There must be some mistake. I never signed any loan documents. We have the paperwork right here, Miss Grant. Your signature is on all the forms." My signature. But not signed by me. I drove to my parents' house in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed Tessa's new car parked outside, a luxury SUV that definitely hadn't been there during my last visit. My father answered the door this time, his face falling when he saw my expression. "Lila, this isn't a good time. Did you forge my signature on a loan application?" The color drained from his face. Behind him, I heard my mother's voice. "Richard? Who's at the door?" I pushed past him into the house. My mother stood in the hallway, while Tessa lounged on her usual spot on the couch, now scrolling through her phone on a brand new iPad. "You committed fraud," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You forged my signature and took out a loan in my name." My mother stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "Sweetheart, we can explain. The $60,000 wasn't for medical bills, was it?" I looked at Tessa's new car through the window, then at her iPad. "It was for this. All of this. We had no choice," my father said quietly. "The bank wouldn't approve another loan in our names. We're already underwater on the mortgage because of me, Tessa interrupted, finally looking up from her device. Just say it, Dad. Because you had to refinance the house to pay for my treatments. Treatments? I laughed bitterly. Like that spa weekend? Or that designer handbag collection you posted about last week. You don't understand how hard it is, Tessa began, but I cut her off. No, I understand perfectly now. You're not sick, Tessa. You're spoiled. And you too. I turned to my parents. You're not just enablers anymore. You're criminals. My mother's face hardened. Everything we've done has been for this family. Family? I pulled out my phone. Should I call the police? Let them decide if fraud is a family value. You wouldn't dare. Tessa sat up straight, real fear in her eyes for the first time. Why not? Because we're family? Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't commit fraud. Family shows up when you're grieving your husband, not makes excuses about migraines. My father stepped between us. Lila, please. We'll figure something out. We can sell the car, return things. Too late, I said, my voice breaking. The payments are already 3 months behind. My credit is ruined. Do you know what that means for Ava's future? For our stability. We'll fix it, my mother insisted. Just give us time. Time. I pulled up the bank's email on my phone. You have until tomorrow to get that loan transferred out of my name, or I'm going to the police. And don't think I'm bluffing. I have nothing left to lose. As I turned to leave, Tessa called out, You're really going to destroy this family over money? I stopped at the door, not turning around. You all destroyed this family long ago. I'm just finally admitting it. Driving home, I called Rosa to check on Ava. Hearing my daughter's laughter in the background, I made a promise to myself. This ended now. No more manipulation, no more guilt, no more fraud. Tomorrow they'd either fix this or I'd fix it for them. Either way, something had to break. And for once, it wouldn't be me. The deadline came and went. No call from my parents, no transfer of the loan, just silence. I sat in my car outside the police station, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The manila folder on the passenger seat contained every document I needed to file charges: bank statements, forged signatures, evidence of fraud. My phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. Ava asking for bedtime story. Coming home soon. Before I could reply, another message popped up from my father's business partner, James. Need to talk. It's about your parents. Urgent. 20 minutes later, I sat across from James in a quiet coffee shop, watching him pull documents from his briefcase. His face looked grave, older than I remembered. Your father doesn't know I'm showing you these, he said, sliding several papers across the table. The business isn't just struggling, Lila. It's bankrupt. Has been for months. I stared at the numbers, the mounting debts, the bounced checks. But they just bought Tessa a new car, with money that should have gone to paying employees. James leaned forward. 3 months of missed payroll. People with families, mortgages. Your father's been taking out loans everywhere he can, trying to keep it afloat. While Tessa shops designer brands, I muttered. There's more. James hesitated. The business insurance lapsed last month. If anyone gets hurt on site. My stomach churned. Why are you telling me this? Because your father saved my business 20 years ago when I was in trouble. But I can't help him now, not with the choices he's making. He stood up, straightening his tie. Whatever you're planning to do about the fraud, just know everything it might impact. I sat there long after James left, staring at the documents. My phone kept buzzing. Rosa, wondering where I was. My mother, probably with more excuses. Tessa, surely playing victim again. Instead of answering any of them, I drove to my old neighborhood. The construction company's office was dark, but I used my old key to let myself in. The place smelled like sawdust and memories, summers helping Dad file papers, learning about building permits, dreaming about taking over someday. I found what I was looking for in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk: photo albums. Not the fancy ones Mom kept at home, but the real ones. Job sites, company picnics, employee celebrations. 20 years of people whose livelihoods depended on this business. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Lila. My father's voice sounded small. The bank called about the loan. I know about the business, Dad. About everything. Silence stretched between us. Then, who told you? Does it matter? What matters is there are families who aren't getting paid while Tessa drives around in a new car. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I cut him off. I'm not just protecting myself anymore. This isn't about family drama or playing favorites. There are innocent people getting hurt. Please, his voice cracked. Just give me time to fix this. I looked at the photos spread across his desk. Faces of people who trusted him, trusted this company. You have until tomorrow morning to tell Mom and Tessa the truth. About everything. Or I go to the police with all of it, the fraud, the missed payroll, everything. You'd destroy your own family? You're destroying families right now, Dad. I'm just deciding which ones to save. I hung up and drove home, where I found Rosa reading to a sleepy Ava. My daughter reached for me with heavy eyes, and I held her close, breathing in her baby shampoo smell. Bad day? Rosa asked quietly. Just complicated, I replied, watching Ava drift off in my arms. Sometimes doing the right thing feels an awful lot like betrayal. Rosa patted my shoulder as she gathered her things to leave. Sometimes betrayal is staying silent when we should speak up. I sat in the darkness with my sleeping daughter, thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between revenge and justice. Tomorrow would change everything. Either way, there was no going back. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Tessa. Whatever you're planning, don't. You'll regret it. I turned off my phone without replying. Some regrets, I was learning, were easier to live with than others. The next morning, I walked into my parents' house using my key, only to find Tessa already there, pacing the living room in designer workout gear she'd probably never used. Mom sat rigid on the couch while Dad stood by the window, looking years older than he had yesterday. Finally, Tessa spat. Come to destroy everything, have you? I placed my laptop on the coffee table, opening it to display the police department's website. I'm here to watch Dad tell the truth. All of it. Mom's face paled. Richard, what is she talking about? Before Dad could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Martinez Construction, his largest client. His hands shook as he answered, walking into the kitchen for privacy. We all heard him anyway. What do you mean pulling out of the contract? We've worked together for 15 years. Tessa shot me an accusatory glare. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I replied truthfully. But secrets have a way of spreading. Dad returned, his face ashen. They're canceling all projects. Someone told them about the missed payroll. You did this, Mom pointed at me, her voice trembling. You're trying to ruin us. No, you did this, I countered, pulling out James's documents. Every time you chose Tessa's luxuries over paying employees. Every time you forged my signature instead of facing reality. Oh, here we go again, Tessa rolled her eyes. Poor overlooked Lila, always jealous of her sick sister. I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Sick. Show them, Tessa. Show them your medical records, the real ones, not the ones you've been faking. The room went deadly quiet. What is she talking about? Mom turned to Tessa, whose face had gone from angry to frightened. She's lying, Tessa whispered, but her hand unconsciously went to her purse, clutching it closer. Your daughter's been scamming you for years, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Those expensive treatments? Spa weekends? Those special medications? Shopping sprees. And you both enabled it, bankrupted Dad's company for it, committed fraud for it. That's not. Mom began, but I cut her off by reaching for Tessa's purse. Tessa yanked it away, but not before several prescription bottles fell out. Empty bottles with different doctors' names, different pharmacies. Dad picked one up, examining the label. This prescription. It's forged. Like my signature? I asked quietly. Mom stood up, swaying slightly. Tessa, tell them they're wrong. Tell them you're really sick. But Tessa's face had changed, morphing from fear to something harder, colder. What was I supposed to do? You both made it so easy, falling over yourselves to help poor, fragile Tessa. At least I got something out of being your daughter. The slap echoed through the room. Mom stood there, hand still raised, staring at Tessa's reddening cheek. The police are coming, I said into the silence. I called them this morning. They'll want to talk about the fraud, the forged prescriptions, everything. You'd send your own sister to jail? Dad asked, his voice breaking. No, I replied, standing up. I'm giving you one chance to fix this. Pay back the employees. Sell Tessa's car, her clothes, whatever it takes. Transfer that loan out of my name. Or I press charges against all of you. You can't do this to me, Tessa pleaded, suddenly looking very young and scared. I'm your sister. My sister died a long time ago, I said, gathering my things. She died every time she watched me grieve alone, every time she took advantage of our parents' love, every time she chose greed over family. As I reached the door, Mom called out, If you do this, you'll never see us again. I turned back one last time, seeing them all there, Mom's shocked betrayal, Dad's defeated slump. Tessa's mask finally cracking to show the scared girl beneath. I haven't really seen you in years, I said softly. I've just been looking at reflections of who I wished you were. The drive home felt longer than usual. My phone kept buzzing with texts from all of them, but I didn't need to read them. Sometimes the hardest part of revenge isn't executing it, it's living with the aftermath. 3 weeks after my ultimatum, I sat in my kitchen at midnight, staring at an eviction notice. The bank had frozen my accounts due to the fraud investigation, and my savings were depleted from covering the fraudulent loan payments. Even Rosa had to find other work. I couldn't afford her help anymore. My phone lit up with a text from James. Your father filed for bankruptcy today. Thought you should know. I deleted it without responding, just like I'd deleted all the others. The news articles about the construction company's collapse. The desperate messages from my mother. Tessa's threats to tell everyone I'd ruined the family. Ava's cough echoed from her bedroom, the same cough she'd had for days. The pediatrician wanted tests, expensive ones our insurance might not cover now that everything was frozen. I pressed my palms against my eyes, fighting back tears. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing there, alone. She looked smaller, somehow older. I opened the door but kept the chain on. What do you want? Your father had a heart attack. The words hung between us like smoke. I found myself unlatching the chain before I could think better of it. When? This morning. After the bankruptcy hearing. She wouldn't meet my eyes. He's stable, but he keeps asking for you. Don't, I warned, hearing the manipulation in her voice. I'm not trying to, she stopped, sighing. Tessa's gone. She emptied what was left in their accounts and disappeared. Left a note saying she's starting over somewhere else. Of course she had. Tessa always knew when to abandon a sinking ship. I'm sorry about Dad, I said, starting to close the door. But I can't. I know what I did wrong, Mom blurted out. With you. With everything. I know now and I'm sorry, but please. He might not make it, Lila. Ava coughed again, harder this time. Mom heard it. Is she sick? I can't afford the tests, I admitted, hating the words, hating that I had to say them. The accounts are frozen because of the fraud investigation, and the eviction notice came today, and I can't do this anymore. Mom reached for her purse, but I stopped her. No more money between us. It's what poisoned everything in the first place. Then let me help with Ava. While you figure things out. I know I don't deserve it, but... You're right, I cut her off. You don't deserve it. Where were you when Mark died? When I needed someone to watch Ava, so I could plan his funeral. When I cried myself to sleep every night for months. I was wrong, she whispered. So wrong. But please don't punish your father for my mistakes. Don't punish Ava for them either. Ava appeared in the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Mama, my chest hurts. I picked her up, feeling the heat of her fever through her pajamas. She needed a doctor. I needed help, but accepting help from them, it felt like giving up everything I'd fought for. The guest room at the house is still yours, Mom said softly. Just until you figure things out. No strings, no guilt. I'll stay with your father at the hospital if you want space. I looked at my daughter's flushed face, then at the eviction notice on the counter. Sometimes the hardest part of being strong is knowing when to bend. One night, I said finally, just until I can get Ava to the doctor. Mom nodded, not pushing her luck. As she turned to leave, she paused. I found Mark's old letters in the attic. The ones he wrote you in college. I never realized how much he saw in you. How much I failed to see. She left the letters on the counter and walked out, leaving me holding my feverish daughter and staring at the last pieces of the life I thought I'd built. Everything was falling apart, and I couldn't tell anymore if it was because of my revenge or in spite of it. Ava coughed again, burying her face in my neck. Are we going to be okay, Mama? I wished I could tell her yes. I wished I could be sure. Instead, I held her tighter and started packing an overnight bag, wondering if sometimes rock bottom is just another word for starting over. 2 days after moving back into my parents' house, I found Tessa sitting in the kitchen. She looked different. Expensive clothes replaced by a plain sundress, her perfectly styled hair now messy and natural. And she was obviously pregnant. Surprise, she said flatly, resting one hand on her swollen belly. Guess we're both back home. I instinctively moved to block the stairs leading to where Ava was sleeping. What are you doing here? Same as you. Nowhere else to go. She smiled bitterly. Karma's funny like that, isn't it? Mom appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. Tessa called from the bus station. Her husband left her, and she's... Let me guess, I cut in. She needs help. She needs money. She needs everyone to forget what she did and welcome her back with open arms. I lost everything, Tessa snapped. My husband, my home, my life. All because you couldn't keep your mouth shut about a few little white lies. White lies? I laughed. You bankrupted our father's company. He had a heart attack because of what you did. What we did, Mom corrected quietly. We all played our parts. Upstairs, Ava started coughing again. The sound seemed to startle Tessa, who flinched. Is that? She hesitated. Is she okay? Like you care, I said, turning to head upstairs. I do care. Tessa's voice cracked. I know I messed up, okay? I know I was selfish and horrible, and everything else you want to call me. But I'm trying to change. This baby, it's making me see things differently. I stopped, not turning around. Like how you saw things differently when Mark died. When I needed my sister, and you were too busy faking illnesses to show up at his funeral. I was scared, she whispered. Scared that if I stopped being the sick one, the special one, nobody would love me anymore. And now I'm just scared. I finally turned to face her. In the harsh kitchen light, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tear stains on her cheeks. She looked like the little sister I used to know, before everything went wrong. Mom says you're staying in the guest room, Tessa continued. I can take the couch. No, I said firmly. This isn't happening. We're not playing happy family while Dad's in the hospital, and everyone pretends the past never happened. Lila, please. Mom stepped forward. She's pregnant, she has nowhere else to go. And whose fault is that? I demanded. You taught her that there would always be a safety net, always be someone to clean up her messes. Well, I won't do it anymore. Not for her, not for you. Then do it for this baby, Tessa pleaded, tears falling now. Don't let my child suffer for my mistakes. The irony hit me like a slap. Like you let Ava suffer? Like you let me suffer? Some mistakes don't get second chances, Tessa. Ava's coughing grew worse upstairs. As I turned to go to her, Tessa grabbed my arm. I found Mark's letters too, she said quickly. The ones from when I was really sick as a teenager. He wrote to me every week while I was in the hospital, even though he barely knew me. Just because I was your sister. I jerked away from her touch. Don't you dare use Mark. He believed in second chances, she pressed on. He believed people could change. You used to believe that too, before I ruined everything. Upstairs, Ava called out for me. The sound seemed to echo through the kitchen, through years of hurt and betrayal and missed chances. You have until Dad comes home from the hospital, I said finally. Then you need to figure out your own life. I won't let Ava grow up watching this cycle repeat itself. As I headed upstairs, I heard Tessa start to cry. Real tears this time, not the manipulative ones I'd grown so used to. Mom murmured something comforting to her, and for a moment, I almost turned back. Almost. But some bridges, once burned, leave scars too deep to cross again. The trick is learning which ones are worth rebuilding, and which ones should stay in ashes. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, watching Ava arrange her stuffed animals on her bed. The place was smaller than our old home, but it was ours, really ours, with no strings or guilt attached. The bank had finally unfrozen my accounts after Dad testified about the fraud. He'd taken responsibility for everything, protecting Tessa one last time. She'd disappeared again 2 days after he came home from the hospital, leaving only a note saying she was checking into a real treatment center this time. Mom still sent me updates about her progress, though I never responded. The doorbell rang. Rosa stood outside, holding a casserole dish. I was in the neighborhood, she said, though we both knew she'd driven across town. How is the Pequeña's cough? Better. I let her in, watching as Ava ran to hug her. The new medication helped. Rosa set the dish down and pulled an envelope from her purse. This came to your old address. I thought, maybe you should have it. I recognized Mark's handwriting immediately. The letter was dated 3 days before his accident, addressed to my parents. Where did you find this? Your mother gave it to me. Said it was time you had it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Helen and Richard, I'm writing because I know how hard it is for Lila to stand up to you. She loves you, but that love shouldn't cost her herself. One day, she'll realize she's strong enough to choose her own happiness. When that day comes, please let her go. Some daughters need to break free to become who they're meant to be. Love, Mark. The doorbell rang again. This time my parents stood outside. Mom held a small package, while Dad leaned heavily on his cane, a permanent reminder of his heart attack. We're not staying, Mom said quickly, seeing my expression. We found these while packing up the house. She handed me the package. Inside were photos, ones I'd never seen before. Me and Tessa as kids before the manipulation started. Pictures of Mark and me that I thought were lost. Recent ones of Ava that I hadn't known they'd taken. The house sold yesterday, Dad said quietly. We paid back the employees first, like you asked. There's enough left to start over somewhere smaller. And Tessa, she's doing the work this time. Real work. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find yourself. I thought about Mark's letter, about breaking free and becoming who you're meant to be. I can't go back, I said finally, to how things were, to who I was. We know, Dad replied. We're not asking you to. Mom reached into her purse, pulling out one last envelope. This is Tessa's new address. If you ever want to write to her, well, it's your choice. Everything is your choice now. They turned to leave, but Dad paused. We were wrong, Lila, about so many things, but we were most wrong about not seeing how strong you are. After they left, I sat with Rosa while Ava showed her new room layout. The envelope with Tessa's address sat unopened on the counter, a question I wasn't ready to answer. What will you do? Rosa asked softly. I looked at the photos, at Mark's letter, at my daughter playing freely without the weight of family dysfunction hanging over her. I'll keep them, I said, gathering the memories into a box. For Ava when she's older. So she knows where she came from, but also why we chose to go somewhere else. And Tessa's address? I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. Some bridges need to stay burned, so we don't cross them again. But others. I tucked the envelope into the box without opening it. Others might be worth rebuilding someday. Just not today. Rosa nodded, understanding what I couldn't quite say. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying everything. Sometimes it's about building something new from the ashes. Something stronger and truer than what came before. Ava called me to see her finished room arrangement, and I left the box of memories behind. We had our own story to write now, one without guilt or manipulation or false obligations. One where we could both become who we were meant to be.